About 6 months ago, I was going through a box of my grandfather's old books, the ones he kept wrapped in cloth under his bed. Tucked between a worn prayer book and some faded receipts was a hand-copied map. No labels I recognized. Coastlines, arrows, and tiny marks that looked like stylized waves. My grandfather couldn't tell me where it came from. He said his own father brought it back from somewhere in the Visayas, maybe Cebu, maybe older than that. Nobody knew. I stared at that map for an hour and still couldn't place it in any history I'd been taught in school. That memory never left me. Welcome to Echoes of Ancients, where we dig into the stories your textbooks skipped. Subscribe if you want more of this, because today we're going straight into something that changes the whole picture. Ancient Filipinos navigated and dominated Pacific trade winds across open ocean centuries, possibly millennia, before Polynesian migration reached its peak. They didn't stumble into this. They engineered it. The technology, the knowledge, the roots, all of it points to a seafaring civilization so sophisticated that modern researchers are still arguing about how to date the evidence. The chart nobody dates. That's not a metaphor. There are actual navigation charts, star maps, and oral route systems from the Philippine archipelago that archaeologists and historians cannot pin to a single date with confidence. The evidence spreads across too wide a timeline, too wide to be comfortable, too wide to fit neatly into the colonial era story that Filipinos were farmers waiting to be discovered. So let's start at the beginning of what we know. Stop. The Philippine archipelago sits at the intersection of the Pacific and the South China Sea. You've heard that before, probably in some geography lesson framed around trade and colonizers. Forget that framing for now. Focus on the physics of it. The islands don't sit in the path of seasonal winds. They function as a kind of natural switching station for wind systems. The northeast monsoon, called the Amihan, blows across from October through February. The southwest monsoon, the Habagat, pushes back from June through September. Ancient Filipino sailors didn't fight these winds. They read them like a schedule and built their entire maritime calendar around them. Wait a second. The Balangay boat is the physical proof of this mastery. Researchers excavated the Butuan boats in the 1970s in Agusan del Norte. The oldest specimens dated back to the 3rd century of the Common Era, possibly earlier, based on radiocarbon analysis. These weren't fishing vessels. The hull design, the assembly using lashing techniques with wooden pins called tree nails, the scale of the construction. These boats crossed open water. They carried cargo. They moved people, goods, and knowledge across thousands of kilometers of open Pacific. Here's the scale problem that colonial-era historians never solved satisfactorily. The Butuan boats were found hundreds of kilometers from the nearest deep-sea port. Inland, essentially. The most logical explanation is that Butuan itself was once a thriving port, and the geography changed around it over centuries. The Kingdom of Butuan sent tribute missions to the Song dynasty in China as early as 1010 of the Common Era. The Chinese imperial records confirm this. Filipino envoys arrived with gold, local goods, and navigational knowledge that Chinese court officials found impressive enough to document in detail. Gold. Stop there for a second. Gold. Now pay attention. The Laguna Copperplate Inscription, dated 900 and no year of the Common Era, references debt settlements involving gold. This is the oldest known written document discovered in the Philippines. It's written in a script connected to Sanskrit-influenced Old Malay. It names specific people, specific amounts, specific places. This is a legal and commercial document from a civilization with complex economic relationships, literate administration, and maritime connections stretching across Southeast Asia. These people weren't paddling around the shoreline hoping to find fish. They were running an economy. Now here's the part that connects to the Pacific wind routes in a way that most mainstream history courses completely ignore. Wait a second. The linguistic evidence is uncomfortable for anyone who learned a simplified migration story. Austronesian languages, the family that includes Filipino languages, Malay, and the languages of Polynesia, share vocabulary at the level of seafaring technology. Words for canoe parts, wind directions, stars used for navigation, tidal patterns. The relationships in this vocabulary suggest that the ancestral Austronesian speakers moved outward from a region centered near Taiwan, then swept through the Philippine archipelago, then across the Pacific. The Philippine Islands weren't a stopover, they were the training ground, the place where generations of sailors refined the techniques that eventually carried people all the way to Hawaii, to Easter Island, to New Zealand. Polynesia got the knowledge somewhere. The linguistic and genetic evidence points toward island Southeast Asia, which means the Philippine archipelago and the surrounding waters. The detailed star navigation systems used by later Polynesian wayfinders share structural logic with navigation traditions documented among Filipino coastal communities. The same logic: memorized star paths, identified swell directions, named wind shifts. These aren't coincidences across unrelated cultures, they're inherited techniques. On the other hand, the debate in academic circles centers on timing. Some researchers push the earliest Philippine maritime expansion back before 2,000 years of the Common Era. Others are more conservative. The physical evidence from Butuan, from the gold artifacts found across multiple Philippine islands, from the trade ceramics found in archaeological sites predating Spanish contact, all of this stretches the timeline further back than official curricula tend to acknowledge. The question isn't whether ancient Filipinos navigated the Pacific wind routes. The question is how early they mastered this and how far their influence reached. Palawan. That island holds a particular kind of answer. All right, the Tabon caves in Palawan contain human remains dated back roughly 67,000 years, which makes Tabon man among the oldest known human fossils in Southeast Asia. That figure alone should stop you cold. 67,000 years of human presence in the Philippine archipelago. The sea levels then were lower. Some islands were connected by land bridges. The geography looked different, but the people were there, developing, adapting, learning the water. By the time the sea levels rose and forced coastal communities onto boats or inland, the relationship between Filipino ancestors and the ocean was already ancient in the deepest sense of the word. Now pay attention. The navigation knowledge didn't appear overnight in 2000 before the Common Era. To be honest, it accumulated across dozens of generations of people who had no choice but to understand the water or die. But there's a detail. The oral traditions complicate the picture further. You know, multiple Philippine ethnic groups maintain navigational songs, poetic route descriptions, and star naming systems that linguists and anthropologists haven't fully catalogued yet. The Sama Bajau people, sometimes called sea nomads, carry navigation knowledge in forms that predate written records. Their traditional route knowledge covers stretches of the Sulu Sea and the Celebes Sea that colonial-era European mapmakers got wrong for centuries. European cartographers drew those coastlines inaccurately on charts used for navigation well into the 1700s. The Sama Bajau navigated them correctly long before Europeans arrived with their instruments. Let that contrast sit with you for a moment. All right? The chart nobody dates is partly a literal object and partly a category of knowledge. Physical charts recovered from pre-colonial Philippine contexts often lack the geographic references that Western-trained analysts need to assign them a confident date. They don't use longitude and latitude grids. They use relative positions of stars, named wave patterns, and seasonal wind indicators. Dating these systems requires cross-referencing linguistic evidence, archaeological stratigraphy, and comparative analysis with similar traditions in island Melanesia and Micronesia. The process is slow. Funding for this research is inconsistent. The conclusions, when they arrive, often don't make it into popular history. Important. The researchers doing this work are serious people at serious institutions. The University of the Philippines, the National Museum of the Philippines, and international collaborators from Australia, the Netherlands, and Taiwan. They publish in journals that most people never see. The findings exist. The public doesn't hear about them. 1898 changed the story Filipinos told about themselves, and not in a direction that served the pre-colonial record. The American colonial introduced an education system that centered Western historical frameworks. Filipino history started, for practical classroom purposes, with contact and colonization. The deep past got compressed into a few paragraphs about tribes and animism. The sophisticated maritime civilization, the trade networks, the script systems like Baybayin, the gold working traditions, the diplomatic missions to China, all of this got filed under prehistory and treated as less rigorous than documented colonial-era events. That filing decision shaped what Filipinos knew about themselves for generations. Baybayin deserves its own mention here because script systems don't develop in isolated fishing villages. The pre-colonial Filipino writing system, carved and inked across the archipelago, required a society with enough complexity to need writing. Trade records, messages across islands, route information. A script is infrastructure. You build infrastructure when you have something complex enough to document. The gold pieces found at the National Museum of the Philippines collection, some dated to the 9th and 10th centuries of the Common Era, show craftsmanship at a level that required specialized training passed across generations. The Surigao treasure, recovered from Mindanao, includes pieces of such technical sophistication that goldsmiths who've examined them describe the techniques as requiring hundreds of years of accumulated craft knowledge to execute. Hundreds of years minimum. Gold doesn't lie about time the way written records can be forged. So now go back to that map under my grandfather's bed. He didn't know its origin. His father didn't explain it. But somewhere in that chain of hands that passed a cloth-wrapped book across generations, someone understood what those arrows and wave marks meant. Someone used it. Someone sailed by it. The navigation knowledge embedded in that kind of object doesn't represent a curiosity. It represents the residue of a civilization that understood the Pacific wind system at a level sophisticated enough to cross it repeatedly and survive. Ancient Filipinos didn't stumble across the Pacific. They read it. They scheduled their departures. They named the winds and taught their children the names. They built boats engineered for ocean crossings and sent those boats to China with gold and ambassadors. They developed writing systems and gold-working traditions that required centuries of institutional knowledge to sustain. The chart nobody dates exists in multiple forms. In the Butuan boats, in the Laguna Copperplate, in the Baybayin inscriptions, in the oral root songs of the Sama Bajau, in the gold of Surigao, in the star names embedded in Visayan fishing traditions that old fishermen still recite today. Think about it. The next time someone tells you that Philippine history starts with Magellan, hand them the date of the Laguna Copperplate. 900 and no year of the Common Era. Then mention Butuan's tribute mission to the Song dynasty in 1010. Then ask them where exactly Magellan fits in a timeline that long. 6 months ago, I was staring at a map I couldn't read, wrapped in cloth, passed down through people who sailed. Now I'm starting to understand why my grandfather kept it under his bed, like something worth protecting. Some maps don't need labels to tell you where you've been.